But I'm going to read the prologue, and this is the story of a family for whom a routine outing changes everything forever. Ariadne, my given name, the one that's on my driver's license, is the sort of name that you're supposed to grow into. It was my mother's idea. Her parents underestimated her when they called her Eloise, a name that had strained at the seams before she was old enough to spell it. Our mother's gifts to the three of us were lush, extravagant, roomy names that fit us like oversized coats trimmed in seed pearls, gold braid, and the hides of baby seals. My father had wanted us to have family names with at least one of us girls named after his mother, Lula. My mother, who indulged him in many things, could not give my father this. Why, she wondered, would anyone in this day and age give a child a name that was so Mississippi? That is not what Dr. King died for, she liked to say. People shook their heads with each pink birth announcement. Teachers squinted at class rolls and said, "Who ever heard of black people with names like that? Those kids are going to grow up confused." Mama never forgave us for not appreciating our names. When my older sister, Hermione, came home from first grade and announced that she wanted to be called Sonia, Mama had said, "Why do you have to be so ungrateful? Your name is from Shakespeare." My name, Ariadne, is taken from the Greeks. Mama explained that I was named for a princess. My 10th grade English book gave me the rest of the story. Ariadne was a Greek princess. This much is true. My mother is not the type to lie. The Princess Ariadne saved her lover's life with a length of string which he used to wind his way out of a deadly maze. To show his gratitude, he married her. But after only a few weeks, he dumped her on a rocky island and sailed off. When I confronted my mother with this story, she insisted that there was a happier ending, that Ariadne ended up marrying the god of wine. But for me, the story ends when she's sitting on the island watching the black-sailed boat churn away. My other sister, the baby, Mama's miracle child, the one who got born despite the tide tubes, her name was Genevieve, for the patron saint of Paris. Nicknames were forbidden. I was there when Daddy said Genevieve was too much name for a baby. Couldn't we at least call her Jenny? Mama sighed and waved her hand, one of her elegant gestures that let everyone know that she was more than just an Eloise. I was 9, sitting on the floor between Mama's knees while she threaded clear plastic beads onto my braids. I felt hot prickles of jealousy over my lip. Why hadn't Daddy stuck up for me and my name? Ariadne was obviously the worst of the lot. Genevieve, who had the best name, a name that someone had at least heard of, she lay on a white receiving blanket and chewed on her toes. I looked up and met my father's eyes and turned my face to the orange carpet before they could accuse me of listening to grown folks' conversations. Mama said, "Lincoln, maybe it is too much name for a baby, but Genevieve will not be a baby forever." I looked up again, fast this time. Mama lost her grip on my braid. Heart-shaped beads fell on the floor and rolled under the couch. We were all still for the duration of 3 heartbeats. This had been one of those Greek myth moments when you could just hear the gods look up from their newspapers and raise their eyebrows. On the Saturday before Easter, 1978, Genevieve was 6 months old, teething and blowing spit bubbles when the whole family piled into our burgundy Buick. I liked her. Hermione often told people that I was jealous of the baby because of her soft hair and bleach pine bedroom set. But I wasn't jealous. Genevieve was a beautiful thing, all curves and folds of flesh, smelling of rose water and drool. This is what I remember, and this is the truth. We were on our way to the spring performance at the YWCA, where I took ballet, tap, and jazz. The recital was to be held in a large gymnasium that smelled of pine sol, but all of us were dressed up and looking good. Daddy wore a white shirt with creases sharp enough to shave with, he said, running his fingers down his stiff sleeve. According to Mama, Hermione's pants were too tight, but they looked good. On her, the snugness seemed deliberate, a taunt. My mother outdressed us all, but that was her way. She wore a butter-colored suit and matching pumps. Genevieve was just a little brown face in a nest of aquamarine lace and ruffles. I put on a green jumper over my pink leotard and white tights. This was my favorite dress, worn at least once a week, pulled hot from the dryer each time. I liked it because it covered the raised outline of my training bra, the first of anyone in beginning tap dance. When I wore it, I seemed to be like any other girl. Hermione hadn't wanted to go. She was almost 15 and would have rather stayed home alone, staring at the phone and wondering why boys didn't call her. It was because she was fat. I knew this because I had read her cloth-bound diary. Must lose weight, she had written. Orthodontia, expensive. Necessary? I was glad that she was there, even gladder that she hadn't wanted to be. Staring sullen out the window, she was making a sacrifice, a word we talked about last week in Sunday school. Why hadn't we taken a photo of ourselves before piling into the car? Just a Polaroid or a quick snap with Hermione's 126 camera, creating something that I could use to compare with the images in my head so I could be sure exactly what was remembered and what was invented and what was only wished for. I scooted closer to Hermione, breathing big gulps of her honeysuckle perfume. I lifted the red velvet cake from her lap. It was a big one, 3 layers and dusted on top with chopped pecans. This lovely cake, slightly extravagant, was our family's contribution to the recital reception. I was happy. I do remember this. I had been telling the story of the dogwood trees, raising my voice over Hermione, who sang along with the staticky car radio. "I'm trying to talk," I said. "Well, I'm trying to sing." Daddy turned down the radio. Mama bounced Genevieve on her lap and said, "Shh, sweetie," to the baby, and "Go on, honey," to me. "Before Jesus," I told them, projecting from my diaphragm like my Sunday school teacher had taught me, "the dogwood was as tall and mighty as the oak and pine." "Please tell me that's not your Easter speech," Hermione said. "You know that's just a myth, don't you?" "You don't even know what I was going to say. You didn't let me finish." Hermione shrugged her heavy shoulders. "You were about to say that they used the dogwood to make the cross, and now the tree is so ashamed that it grows all little and hunched up." "That's a good story," Daddy said. His eyes smiled at me in the rearview mirror. "And," I said, "there's the part about the flowers. On every one of the petals is a little red spot. That's the blood, so nobody could forget about Jesus." "Daddy," Hermione said, "can you turn the radio back up? Did they even have dogwood trees where Jesus grew up, in Bethlehem or wherever?" I know what happened next, although I didn't see it. My eyes were on the nut-crusted sides of the red velvet cake when a blue Eldorado barreled down the left side of Hunter Street just after Mosley Park. I'd snuck my finger under the cellophane for a taste of icing and was trying to silently work my thumb to my mouth when Daddy said, "Jesus," and I thought that we were still talking about the dogwoods. Then the car lunged to the right, to the left, and back again. I ruined the cake when our car crumpled against the bark of a 100-year-old magnolia. I hugged it to me, grinding the white icing and red meat of the cake into the bib of my jumper. When the car stopped moving, I didn't look up right away. I stared at my lap and the mess I'd made, dark red like watermelon, busted and overripe. Then Mama wailed and Genevieve stayed quiet. Daddy barked, "Wait," and Hermione cursed softly, enunciating each filthy word while I stuffed a handful of cake into my mouth, choking on its buttery sweetness. Then the women came, some streaming, some tumbling from frame houses built among dogwoods. They ducked under blooming branches, using the flats of their hands to keep sheer scarves on their heads. They hurried toward me and my family, screaming at children to call the ambulance. These were the sort of women who could stop cars by placing their bodies in the roads. They hustled across the street without looking, and the cars did stop. They ran to help us while speaking the name of God. I watched all this through the lined rear windshield of the Buick. On the radio, the Commodore sang, "I'm easy like Sunday morning." I wasn't hurt. Later, I bit my finger until it bled, but when the metal bumper connected with the 100-year-old bark, I was fine. I regarded it all with a slight disbelief, like I was watching a movie with bad actors. My mother bolted from the car, holding Genevieve, who was silent and impossibly bent. When Mama sprang from the car, Hermione clambered out behind her. I scooted toward the open car door, but my sister turned. "You stay here with Daddy," she said, pushing me down onto the ruined cake. I said, "Okay," mashing the metal plates of my tap shoes into red velvet sludge. Daddy was slumped but not silent against the leather-covered steering wheel, taking in the stinking air with jagged breaths. I dug old French fries from the crevices of the car seat. A light-skinned lady wearing pink hair rollers tapped on the window. I cranked it open, letting in a sweet whiff of magnolia and daffodil. She pushed her face into the car, blocking my breeze. "You all right in there?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. "What about everybody else?" "I'm stuck," Daddy grunted. "I'm hurt some." "Don't move then," the lady said. "You're not supposed to move when you're hurt." "I want to get out and see my mama. I got icing on my shoe. The cake got mashed." I reached down for a handful of oily red cake and held it out to her. The lady looked at my hands and then turned to where Mama was. "Jesus," she said. "Go on and stay where you are, sweetheart. Help will be here in a minute. Everybody's tending to your mama. She's got your sister there with her. Holler if you need something." In the back seat, I wiped my hands on my tights and then twisted the button on the pocket of my jumper until it came loose. Then I popped the pearlized plastic in my mouth, chewing with the stale French fries until a pain in my jaw reached my ears and I could almost cry. I wanted to leave the car and escape my father's groaning, but that would have been the sort of cruelty that could never be forgiven. "You hurt, Daddy?" "Yes." "Want me to climb up there?" "No, stay where you are." "But I'm by myself." "No, you're not. I'm here." "It's hot in here." "Spring," he said. Daddy smelled bad, like sweat and something hotter and thicker. "What about the cake?" he said, with words that were more air than voice. I felt something swelling inside me, like what was supposed to happen if you swallowed watermelon seeds. The fruit would grow, crushing you to death from the inside. "I think I'm going to die," I told him. "No, baby, you're not going to die. Tell me about the cake." I looked down at the chunks of moist red cake and off-white icing on the rubber floor mats. "It's ruined." I felt my face collapsing. I opened my mouth, but there was no air to cry with. "Ariadne, baby," he said, "I'm so sorry." He started to sob in gasps and coughs. I stuck my fingers in my ears and sang nursery rhymes. I sang about Georgie Porgy, Mary and her lamb, and even nasty rhymes I had heard boys sing at school. With my hands tight over my ears, I ignored my father, my good, kind father with the space between his front teeth, my sweet daddy who gave me $2 bills for every A on my report card. To the only man who ever loved me, I said, "I'm not listening. I can't hear you." Since we had no relatives, the police called Mr. Fennessy, my father's best friend. He was out of town, so his daughter Colette came to pick me up. She was only about 19, but she seemed like a woman to me. She wore the white barber's coat that she wore to work at her father's shop. "Come out," she said to me, opening the door. I scooted to the other side of the car, pressing against the opposite door. My hands were still sweet from cake, and I pressed them to my mouth, nicking my skin on the edges of my teeth. "Come on," she said, crawling in. A heart-shaped locket bounced at her throat. She was close to me now. Colette's face was young, as smooth as cardboard and the same color. Hands around my waist, she tugged me from the canal of the back seat into the spring day. When the paramedics came to remove my father from the car, she held me to her and used one rough hand to press my face into her collarbone. "Don't look up," she said. Her other hand rubbed my back in slow, easy circles. I stiffened, worried that she would feel the bra through the armor of the jumper, but she just rocked me like an infant and hummed a quiet tune. Many times since then, I've tried to identify the song that was on her lips that afternoon. Sometimes I'm convinced that she hummed Amazing Grace while they strapped my father to the stretcher and hurried him away. But every now and again, I will hear a scrap of music that pierces my heart, and I will think that maybe this is the song she played in my ear, the song that separated me from my pain for a few moments on the worst day of my life. "Aria," she said softly into my hair. "Shh, Aria." I knew that she was talking to me, although no one had ever shortened my name. "I like it when you call me that." Aria wasn't a name that I needed to grow into, something I could appreciate later. It was a name I could use right then, leaning against the side of a police sedan on the side of the road near a 100-year-old magnolia. I slid into this new name, pulling it close around me like a donated blanket. "Are my daddy and Genevieve going to die?" I asked Colette. "That's up to God," she said, laying me down on the back seat of her father's Brougham. As we pulled away, I looked back at the dogwood trees that lined the road, staring at the bloody blossoms clustered on the branches like 100 dying butterflies. So I thought I would stop here and take some questions, but I had to drink some water first. I had terrible laryngitis on my book tour, and I was out of my voice for 11 days, and I was told it's because I don't drink enough water. And I said, well, I did the book tour for Leaving Atlanta, and I didn't drink that much water. And the doctor said, yes, but now you're no spring chicken. So I'm going to drink some water. Okay, I can talk. Any questions? You can ask me about writing life, the writing life. Who I think is going to win the World Series, anything. Yes?
Well, I read this just recently, Leaving Atlanta, and I'm so impressed with how you can remember the inside of a fifth grade child's head and what that child would be thinking all the time, and the dialogue, the internal dialogue in that fifth grade child's head. You can remember that. I can't remember that.
You can remember it. The thing about it is this, about writing children's voices, is that once you start writing the piece, it's almost like if you try to remember something, and you ever talk to someone and they say a word that you haven't thought about in 20 years, and it brings up other associations, it just keeps going, but you have to like stay in there and just keep remembering, because every memory leads to another memory. And then there are all these things that don't even exist anymore. Like when I was a little kid, on the top of the department store downtown that's now Macy's, used to be Rich's, they had a ride up there called the Pink Pig. The Pink Pig doesn't exist anymore. But once I remembered that there was a Pink Pig, then I remembered that they would give out free tickets to the Pink Pig. And I remember that the free tickets were given away if you had perfect attendance. And then I remember how much I valued perfect attendance, so it just goes like that. And the key to writing children's voices is to remember, children do not find one another to be cute. And you try to write children the way they see each other. You're in the fifth grade, you didn't say, oh, this little kid that's about to come and terrorize me, isn't that cute? So you try to remember. It's like when you're a kid, you live in a foreign country with its own rules. It has its own currency because y'all don't have any money, right? So something else becomes the means of exchange. And you just kind of imagine that you lived abroad for 10 years and you're writing a memoir about that time. And you get in it like that. Yes, ma'am.
So you're collecting memories. In your process where you go through the novels, did you go through the process of writing, collecting all the stories, and then piecing them together? Did you have a story that came to you and then access the memories to put it in the story?
Well, with Leaving Atlanta, because I wanted to write about the child murders, I had that time in mind, and I knew, so I kind of worked with I started off with character and the details started coming, but every time I did a rewrite, it became more detailed because I remembered other stuff. So like if I write on around page 150, I got the idea of having like a kind of kleptomaniac kid stealing all the candy, then had to go back and put candy. And then I said, well, what kind of candy? Because candy is different now than it was. And I got to just start remembering. And that was actually the hardest because my mother didn't believe we should eat out of cans because she thought we'd get lead poisoning. She was like that kind of mom, and so we couldn't have sugar. And so I had to think, like, what candies did I covet? And that brought it right back. Tapped into my anger.
Which candy was it?
I wanted the Alexander the Grape. It was a grape that was dressed for combat. And that was Alexander the Great. My mother kept calling it Alexander the Great. And I didn't know who Alexander the Great was. I was like, why can't she it's the grape. That's the whole point. He's a grape. I thought she was so unsophisticated not to understand that. Yes.
Is some of that, in Leaving Atlanta, is some of that biographical?
And
I'm almost through reading it, and it's very compelling.
Oh, well, thank you.
And I saw your name mentioned once in a while in there.
Yeah, in Leaving Atlanta, I have a namesake character, and anything that happened to her really happened to me. I decided that it would not be fair for me to have a namesake character and endow her with such gifts. Like, I was not the most beautiful child in class. Teachers didn't particularly like me. They didn't dislike me, but I didn't stand out. And so I decided that if I was going to have this namesake character, that her life would have to mirror mine as closely as possible, that this wasn't my chance to redo things. Because the whole point of the project was really to document a moment in history, and I couldn't redo my personal history. Yes, ma'am.
You write with such clarity about your life looking back, and I was just wondering if there were some strategies or techniques that you used to kind of develop that, and how some ideas on how you've developed that.
You know, writing things in the past comes much more natural to me. In The Untelling, most of the action, our character is now 25, and she's looking at questions of family and motherhood, and that was actually much harder to write, because I feel like when I write the kid world, like, there's not a fifth grader alive that confuses me. I've got their number. So I can write as kind of the god of the text, because I know the motives and of everybody, and in the back of my mind too, I know that in 15 years they'll be in college and none of it will matter, and so it gives you like a kind of distance and an understanding. But writing The Untelling when Arya is 25, trying to decide if she wants to be a mother and how, etc. I don't know the answers to those questions, and I felt like I wrote with a less steady hand actually there, because I approached Untelling looking for answers, and I wrote Leaving Atlanta knowing the answer. So it was a very different process.
So the next book you will write, do you have in mind a character? Is there a character that sometimes spins out for you?
You know, mine don't spin. No, it doesn't happen to me. I always feel that if I'm still thinking about the characters in the book, I haven't finished the book. And so I revise them until I'm no longer thinking about them. That's how I know I'm finished. So even if my editor says, okay, it's done, I don't believe it's done. If I'm still thinking about any of those people, then it's not done. So I have a new one started off. It's about bigamy. I got kind of interested in bigamy, because that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, you probably, if you have some bigamy going on in one city, you cannot get your bigamy off the ground unless one family is cooperating. That it would be very hard. You have to have one branch, like the secret kind of bigamy, like the low down, dirty kind of bigamy, that the one family has to participate and has to collude. And then, so I'm really concentrating on the life of the family that has colluded, because that to me is really interesting. Under what circumstances? Like, what does it mean to know that your very existence is a secret? And that's kind of like what I'm wrestling with.
Is that set in Atlanta as well?
It's set in Atlanta. Hotlanta, my hometown. One reason, too, about Atlanta is changing so much that I really feel like I'm documenting a city that is no more. I didn't realize until I was on the road with Leaving Atlanta. I went to Atlanta to talk about it, and I was talking to people, and I was trying to explain to them how during the child murders, it seemed like the bodies were found in such far-flung places that no one had heard of. And I gave an example of one. I said they found bodies in Lithonia off Panola Road. And the people were like, oh, really? Was it near the Walmart? And when I was growing up, this was the wilderness. And so I can't even explain what my hometown is to people who live there now. So I do feel like the way the cities are changing, it's so important to document. Like, The Untelling is set in a neighborhood that's half gentrified. Like, over here, the houses are back to their Victorian magnificence. The one in the middle is still affordable, so you have like an average family. But then over here, you'll have empty houses where people are squatting. So you have this strange moment when such a cross-section of Atlanta lives on a single block. And those kind of moments don't last, because if that property value continues to go up, those squatters are out of there. And if it doesn't go up, those rich people are out of there. So I wanted to just try to capture these moments while they're still here. Yes?
What do you do to relax and have fun?
I don't relax or have fun. Really, I don't. I've been thinking a lot about relaxing and having fun, because it's almost like you can't do it and get the right, you can't do it. The competition in the writing world is so intense. Like when you write your first book, you feel so special. You've written your first book, your mommy has seen it, she's written about it in the Christmas letter to everyone. You feel so special. But then when you get out there, it seems like everybody in New York has a book. You know, and so you just have to keep pushing, and you keep telling yourself that soon there'll be a time when you don't have to push so hard and you can do other things. But I haven't really reached that. I mean, the closest thing I do resembling fun, oh, that's not really fun. Let me see. I don't know. I guess I read, but that's still kind of work related. Yeah, I don't know. Let me think on it. I'll get back to you. Yes.
Can you tell us about your sense of yourself as a writer when it first emerged, and your journey as a writer?
You know, I had a very unusual journey. I always wanted to write since I was a little girl, and it was regarded the way you would, like, let's say you had a kid who had a good voice, and the kid was like, I'm going to be a famous singer, and you would say, oh, that's nice, but you don't really think it's going to happen. You know, so no one ever stopped me from being a writer, but no one encouraged me. I went to a science and mathematics high school. Imagine this, yes. I mean, it was so advanced. Kids, this one boy from our class went to the International Science Fair in Japan because he had done some cancer research in 11th grade. And there was me. I wanted to be a writer. And in the 12th grade, you had to do your science project in order to graduate. And I had a project, and it had a title called The Effects of Acid Rain on the Germination of Some Selected Seeds. Because you remember in the 80s, acid rain was what global warming is now. We were convinced that it was acid rain that was going to do us in. So I tried to make some acid rain in my basement, and it went awry. It was bubbling out of the beaker, and I was like, oh no, I ran out of the basement. I was like, what if it explodes? And I just knew this was the end of, I thought I wasn't going to finish high school. But ultimately, anybody can predict the effects of acid rain on the germination of some selected seeds. If you pour the acid rain, it's not going to grow. So I faked the data, and so I wrote, you know, more acid, less growth, you know, very simple graph. And my mother said, she said, you know, when you get to college, you can have a major and just do that. And it meant so much to me. And so I wrote, and I wanted to go to school to study creative writing, but my mother is an economist by trade. Her PhD is in econ, and she said, you know, it doesn't make sense to spend money on a degree that won't ever make you any money. She said, you know, you go in debt for business school, then you get a good job and you pay it off. You go to debt in creative writing, you just go into debt. So I went to school. I studied toward several PhDs in literature at a few universities, but I always wanted to do creative writing. And then I was in an elevator in Portland, and I met a woman who directed a creative writing program in Arizona, and she said, move to Arizona and work with me. I'll help you. I'll be your mentor. And I said, she said, but you have to tell me by Friday because deadlines, et cetera. And I said, oh, no, man. I said, I can't move to Arizona. I just started the third PhD program in my life. I can't drop out of another PhD program. I cannot tell my parents I'm dropping out of another PhD program. I said, isn't it really hot out there? And that's the state that doesn't have a king holiday. And she said, your parents will get over it. They love you. It's only hot in the summer. And we've just had a voter referendum, and we'll get the king holiday by the time you get there. So I wanted to drop out, and I told my dad, I said, I'll use this in Leaving Atlanta. I said, Daddy, I want to do this. He's a political scientist. I'm the spawn of social scientists. My parents are both quantoids. They both, you know, like, I said, I want to go to Arizona. And he said, you know, your problem, he said, you never had to pick cotton. He said, when you pick cotton, you don't say, am I challenged by this cotton? You don't say, is this cotton field my niche? You don't say, I don't feel this cotton is recognizing my complexity. He said, you just pick the damn cotton. Don't get emotional attachment to your work, just do it. But I did it anyway. I went out there, and I knew this was my chance. Like, if I didn't have a book by the time I finished this program in 3 years, what would I do? I've done something that everyone thought was the stupidest thing they ever heard. And so when I was I think that's when I got in the habit of not having fun, because when I went there, that's all I did was worked on Leaving Atlanta every day. I woke up in the morning, and I worked on it until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, every day, every day, every day. And then when I finished, I gave it to the lady who brought me there, who promised to help me. She sent it to her agent, and that's how the book came out. But I mean, I took a big chance. And it really does get to be like 108. I mean, it's really hot. But, you know, I moved out there to do it because I felt like this was the chance to do the only thing I've ever wanted to do. And that's how it happened. Yes.
So having gotten there, and as you said before, you never feel like you're really there because you have to keep going, keep going. How does it feel now, though, to say 2 books published and it was all worth it?
I do think it was all worth it. I mean, it does feel good to say I'm a writer and have some evidence of it. And it's nice that my mom, I hate to keep going back to this, but that when she writes in a Christmas letter, she doesn't have to use a euphemism. You know, she can say actually what happens to me because she spins it for my brothers, you know. She's like, Bo has decided to leave school, you know, as opposed to Bo has left school. And she used to have to do that to me. She used to, I could tell in the phrase in the Christmas letters it meant she wasn't proud because she would spin, you know, what I had done. And now she can just say it. She already had a book come out this year. You know, it's very clear. And so that kind of gives me some, it feels good like within the family, but also just in my life because it's what I want to do. And I did it, I won't say I did it by myself. A lot of people have helped me, but I did it largely on my own steam. I set a goal and I worked toward it and it happened. And it means a lot to me. I mean, I keep it in mind all the time because it's very hard to learn to enjoy what's happened to you. You always have the eye, like you say, you have your eye on the next thing, or, you know, you have more fabulous friends, and it's kind of hard to not look at them. Like, I have a girlfriend who's going back to Europe on the second paperback tour for her first book. And I was like, wow, my first book, you know, I didn't even go to California. And, you know, she's gone to Paris. And sometimes you feel yourself doing that, and you just have to make yourself stop it. Just make yourself stop it and enjoy what you've done. Yes.
I have 2 questions. One, where do you live now?
I live in Urbana, Illinois.
And the other question is, do you hope that your books have an influence on people? And if so, what is that influence?
Now, that's a hard question. I guess on some level, it's like you hope that your books have influence on people, but then you feel terribly vain to hope that your books have insight. You know, I feel like with Leaving Atlanta, I really, 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 really wanted people to remember the child murders, and it was my way of memorializing those who died, and so that was really important to me. And the untelling, I think it has so many unanswered questions. I just hope that it can just kind of challenge people's assumptions and just think a little bit. Yes, sir.
What novel or novelists have inspired you or influenced your life?
Do you mean what novelists have inspired me in real life or on the page? Because sometimes you meet people who, maybe they aren't the greatest novels, but they're so supportive as mentors.
On the page.
On the page. I have most recently been inspired on the page. I read a book called Sweetwater by Roxana Robinson. I read it last week, and it made me go back and revise the 45 pages I've written of my new book. I read that book, and I was like, I'm going about this all wrong. And I started over. So it happens to me a lot, whatever I read recently. Sometimes I feel like books fall in my hands to help me with what I'm working on. It's such a strange thing, like even reading of mysteries. I know like literary writers, we aren't supposed to admit that we read mysteries, but I read them all the time to remind myself to keep it going, keep it going. You know, when you write literary, you can just get so caught up in your own language and nothing's happening. You're just weaving metaphors and similes. So I like to read a little fast-paced something to remind myself that something has to happen.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.